All right, as I am filming this, it has been almost an entire year where I have not had any alcohol. The actual 1 year anniversary is a couple days away, and by the time I post this video, we will have passed it. Now that it is about a year in, I figured I would just pull up and tell you all about how it has gone. If you want to see how this journey started for me, you can look at the other video that I posted almost a year ago, and I will link that in the description. It should also show up somewhere on the screen. All right, so the question that I think everyone will have is just, how did it go? Do I consider the experiment a success? Do I think I want to continue it? And I will answer some of these questions at the end of the video, but I will say right now, I think it was pretty successful. I would definitely say that the net impact on my life was positive, and I will go a little bit more into why that actually was. So let me tell you about the experience, and like any good video, I've made a list of 9 different topics that I want to talk through. All right, item number 1 is around health effects. This is something I'm pretty sure I talked about in my last video, but there's all the obvious things around your liver and your sleep and just your mood and how you feel, hangovers, all of that. And I'm pretty sure I said this in my first video, but I would say again, I think that this definitely had a positive impact on my health, no surprise. The thing I thought a lot about this year with regards to health, which was a little bit more of a surprise, was just some of the new information and research that is coming out there around just how much it does affect your health. You know, before I embarked on this experiment, I, like really everyone else, was a little bit confused about whether it was actually that bad for your health or not. There were all these studies that would say that, like, hey, actually maybe even a little bit of wine is good for you in moderation. But as I really looked into it, it is seeming like the tide is turning on the science in the direction of saying that alcohol just isn't good for you really in any amount. And so I don't want to scare you all, because I know most people are still drinking and maybe still in small or moderate amounts. It's like not that bad for your health. But I'll just say that there's like a lot of new research out there that is starting to put that into question. If you want to learn more, and I recommend that you do, I'm actually going to link to a podcast from a guy named Andrew Huberman, and he had a pretty good summary of just the current state of knowledge on this. And I would just advise you all to either watch that or consume some recent information on the topic, just so that you know what it is that you are consuming and how it might or might not impact you. Yeah, it was just eye-opening for me and kind of surprising for me, and just something that I think everyone should really know about. I do kind of wonder if we are going to be in a place soon where alcohol is like cigarettes. Everyone used to smoke, and then it came out that, hey, this is actually really bad for you, and then the tide turned very quickly. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but that's something that I've been thinking about a lot as well. So that was on health. Second topic, which is somewhat related, is around anxiety. Now, like a lot of things on this list, it's a little bit hard to tease out correlation versus causation, but I will say that I think that my general anxiety levels before I stopped drinking were higher on average than they were in the last year. And again, this is actually related to the topic that I just went over around the health effects, because one of the things that is coming out is that alcohol may have an impact on your base levels of anxiety, a negative impact, in fact. And it's a bit counterintuitive, because I think a lot of people would drink to remove their anxiety or to feel better. And it turns out that for a lot of people, it has the opposite effect, at least in the long term. Maybe in the short term when you're actually drinking, it relieves it, but then in the long term, apparently it can have the impact of exacerbating it. So yeah, I just have to say I've just felt less worried, less anxious about work or relationships or whatnot than I maybe used to, which is great. The reason it is a little hard to say whether this is fully due to this experiment is because I also made another major change at the same time, which maybe I'll make another video about, and that was that I more or less stopped looking at social media. I didn't cut it completely out, but I would say 99%. I probably look at Instagram for maybe a couple minutes a day. So I'm sure that that has played a role as well. The third thing I'll talk about, which is a little bit related to the previous one, is that my overall confidence levels, I think, have gone up, especially confidence in social situations. And again, this is a bit counterintuitive, because I think most people would say that alcohol is a social lubricant. It makes you more confident. And just as I reflect, I think that the reason that I drank before was largely to help alleviate nervousness and social anxiety. But what I think it also did was it gave me a crutch that was actually preventing me from developing comfort and maybe even some social skills that I could be using when I was not drinking. And so for basically the last year, I've had to face all social situations without any alcohol at all. And, you know, I pretty much did all of the same types of things that I would do even when I was drinking. I went out to bars, I went out to parties, I went out to big company events, I went to dance clubs. I basically did it all. And yes, for many of those events, either right before the event or right at the beginning of the event, I would feel a little bit of that nervousness, especially if it was an event with people that I did not know very well. But what I learned was that that feeling quickly passes, and I still usually have fun, and I usually get to the point where I'm pretty comfortable. And so just going through so much of that has really built up my confidence and has also made it so that when I'm in situations where people are not drinking, where it's maybe just a hangout during the day or a work event, I just feel like I don't need the crutch anymore, which is really great. And then the other part of the confidence is that I've just done something which I think a lot of people would consider hard, which is not drinking for an entire year. And that in itself brings some confidence, even though, and maybe as I go through this, you'll kind of see this, I actually don't think it was that hard, but it is a little bit of a feeling of accomplishment. Okay, the fourth part is that I think my fitness did improve a little bit. And this is also really hard because I don't know if I necessarily look that different, and maybe I even look worse, who knows? But the way that my fitness improved was in some of my strength and some of the skill work that I would do in things like CrossFit. So for instance, this past year, I was finally able to do muscle ups consistently in CrossFit. And if you don't know what that is, I will try to overlay some video of what that looks like. This was a thing that I could do like maybe one at a time, but now I got to the point where I could do 4, 5, 6 in a row without letting go of the bar. And it's just not something I could do before. The other thing is that on some of my lifts in the gym, so things like bench press, squat in particular, I was able to pass some plateaus on just the amount I've been able to lift that I had been stuck at for years. And so I'm just stronger now than I was before. And again, this is a correlation versus causation thing. Maybe it was just that I changed other stuff that maybe helped me do this. But the reason I think that part of it could be due to being sober for the entire year is that, and I didn't really measure this, but I think I was able to just get into the gym maybe more consistently than I would have been able to otherwise, especially on the weekends. And I think that those gym sessions were probably more productive than they would be otherwise, just because I was basically never hungover. If I just think about it as an example, the counterfactual. So every Sunday for much of the year, I had a kickball game. I have a kickball league that I'm on, and we play every Sunday. And usually the game is in the morning or in the early afternoon. And then we would go out to a bar, and most of the kickball team members would drink, but I would not drink. And then what would happen is I would usually go to the gym after hanging out with them at the bar, and I would do a bunch of my lifts. Now, if I was drinking, I think that I would have made a lot fewer of those gym sessions on Sundays, in particular after kickball. And I think that even if I had made those sessions, if I had been drinking earlier in the day, I just don't think that they would have been as good. So again, could be some correlation versus causation, but I think it probably did have a positive impact. The fifth thing I want to talk about with my experience is my social life, which I would say did change. And I've debated back and forth in my mind on whether I think it has changed for the positive or the negative, but I'm pretty sure it's for the positive. But let me tell you why it sometimes feels not as clear. So there's, of course, the belief out there that you need to drink to have fun in social events, or at the very least that it is much harder to have fun when you are sober. And I'll say that that belief has been more or less shattered for me. I have attended, just like I mentioned earlier, so many events that I would have before thought I needed to drink to have fun, and I actually still managed to have fun even without drinking. There's, of course, the question of if I could have had more fun if I had been drinking, and that's hard for me to answer. I think there were definitely some events where if I had been drinking, I would have maybe for the first part of the event had more fun. It definitely gives you a high and it numbs out a bunch of feelings, and I mean that's why a lot of people do it. But I think that before, that feeling only lasted for maybe 20-30 minutes for me, unless I just kept drinking. And if I did keep drinking, it would eventually turn negative and I would start feeling bad like during the event, and then certainly after the event, and the next day and the day after that I would feel a hangover. So I am kind of trading off the early on positive spike that you might get up from alcohol, and I think I'm just not getting that spike, but the overall happiness and the overall fun, if you look at the entire time during the event, and especially after the event, I would say at least neutral, if not probably better in the non-alcohol version of the world. So I should also say that the way I spend my time, at least in social environments, has changed pretty dramatically this year. I would say that the people that I spend time with has definitely shifted. I would say that the way that I spend my time has shifted as well. While I have gone out to many bars and parties and things like that, I would say that I do go out to those types of things less. And I would say that I definitely do more of the kind of smaller dinners with like 1 or 2 people, or also frankly, and this is like not social anymore, but I do spend more nights probably at home doing my own thing. But I think even this is a positive change. And this one is really interesting because especially the going out less, and maybe this is partly because I'm getting older, but I'm going out less, and I also think I don't really miss it as much. Because there were many opportunities or many times where it's like I could go out and, I was invited out and I just didn't want to. Because I guess if I just sum up the whole social thing for me with this alcohol-free experiment, it has just made me really think about which social events and which types of activities I actually enjoy doing versus which ones I don't. Because I think when you're drinking alcohol, if you go to an event that is not really that great of an event, or maybe the people there aren't that great or you don't really connect with them, if you're drinking alcohol, you can just kind of drink and numb that feeling out. Especially if the event is boring, which I kind of found out that a lot of events without alcohol are. You can just drink alcohol and you can numb it out and you can just be in your own world. But without alcohol, it is like, if it's not a good event, it's actually just really hard to be there. And so you're left with the dilemma of, okay, I could drink and make this thing bearable, or I could just go do something else that is fun or entertaining or interesting or a value add to my life, even without the alcohol. And I guess more often than not, I've just chosen to do the latter, just to choose to spend my times in ways that I think are actually good for me and actually that I enjoy. And so again, there have been some of those traditional things where people are drinking and I had a lot of fun, and those are great. There have been other ones like that where I'd go to a bar and maybe I didn't really know the people and maybe I wasn't really having that fun. And I definitely did maybe more of my fair share of the Irish goodbye at those events than I would have, before this experiment. In particular, I have one memory of, there was this one event, I was out at a bar, everyone was drinking. I didn't really know many of the people, and I got there, I stayed there for an hour and I was like, this is just not fun. And I just did an Irish goodbye. I opened up my AMC app and I saw that there was a movie playing and I decided, hey, I'm just gonna go to the movies. And that was a much better use of my night. Okay, item number 6 is that I realized that many people, not all people, but many people will assume that you have a problem with alcohol if you are not drinking. And this is a really weird one for me because, and I came across this saying many, many times over the last year, but I'll just say it anyway. There's a saying that goes that alcohol is the only drug that you have to justify not consuming. It's just so rare that people just quit cold turkey. Like, even to this day, I only know of one other person that I know in my own kind of personal life that I see on a somewhat regular basis that also does not drink. Maybe 2 people. There's 2 people I can think of. And they're both people at work. But it's like, I don't really know anyone else who is pursuing this way of living. So on the one hand, I could see why people would make the assumption. And it's really interesting because there were definitely even some people where I basically said I didn't really have a problem with alcohol before this. And they just didn't believe me, and they kept asking and following up, and it's like, where'd you hit your rock bottom? You must have really, done something to, quit completely. And so it's just really fascinating. And I used to be self-conscious about this, and I used to feel the need to insert some kind of hint when I'm, if I was telling someone that I was doing this experiment, I used to feel the pressure to insert some kind of hint, either direct or indirect, that, oh, by the way, I didn't have a drinking problem. I'm just doing this as an experiment. But now I decided that if people want to believe that, I'm kind of okay with it. I just can't really control it. And if they believe it, that's fine. Item number 7, and this is another reaction that I got from people, is that you definitely learn a lot about other people's relationship with alcohol. Because what usually happens is I tell someone that I'm doing this and I never ask, but for whatever reason, everyone feels compelled to tell me why they are drinking alcohol. And I think it's always an interesting conversation, and I'm always very curious, but I remain just very intrigued by the dynamic. And I think it's because people feel guilty or maybe feel judged and whatnot and feel whatever, who can know. But yeah, I heard a lot of commonalities for why people said that they drink. Like, some people definitely did say that they drink it for the taste, but I will say that most people, it seems like they were drinking for something related to social anxiety or to feel more comfortable in social situations, or it's like, I need this to actually be in a social situation. So yeah, all similar to the reasons why I was also doing it. And it was just very interesting to hear and very kind of comforting to hear that shared experience. And I also heard 1 or 2 really interesting stories about just people's problems with alcohol, or people who knew people who had big problems with alcohol. And so yeah, that has just been an interesting thing to reflect on as well. Okay, item number 8 is that I've just had to face really all of the events in my life without having alcohol as a crutch. And this is, I started to talk about this earlier when I was talking about the social thing where, for example, if I was feeling nervous or anxious before an event, I just kind of had to deal with it. If I was feeling stressed about something at work, if I was feeling frustrated or angry about something, I just got used to really dealing with all of my emotions. And I think that this is probably a good thing for me overall. It's maybe not as fun in the moment when you are feeling these emotions, but I think overall I can just deal with my emotions better. And that seems like long-term just a beneficial thing. Okay, and then item number 9, and this is maybe the only slight disadvantage to all this, is that I do still sometimes feel like an outsider. Because look, I think my desire for alcohol itself has more or less gone away. Like if I'm at an event where people are drinking, I cannot really remember very often feeling tempted to also order a drink, which is very different from the times I've tried to give up sugar and desserts, where I'm like always tempted to order the dessert. So not tempted by the alcohol itself, but I would say that sometimes I do have the desire to just fit into the crowd a little bit more than what I feel like I do right now. And it's like, frankly, if everyone else around me was not drinking, I really don't think I would feel that at all. But still live in a world where virtually everyone is a drinker, and so you do feel a little bit different from everyone. But I think overall, I don't really mind this that much either. It's just a bit of a weird feeling, because I think I've had this experience this last year where, again, I think it's mostly positive, and it's almost like, I'm gonna make a weird analogy, it's almost like I used to be in the Matrix and now I kind of got out and I see what the world is like or what it could be like without it, and it's just so different from what I imagined. But I just see everyone else just living the same life that I used to live, and it's just like, oh, I used to be like that, but I'm not like that anymore, and I don't quite want to go back to it either, but I feel separated. So it's just a weird feeling. All right, so that's my 9 items, and maybe just to sum it up, I'll answer a couple of questions that might be on your mind. The first one is, do I plan to keep going? And my answer is yes, until further notice. I do not have any plans to return to drinking. As I said earlier, it hasn't really been as hard as I thought, and I think it is net positive in my life. I'm not declaring here that I will never drink again. It is entirely possible that something might change in my life, or that I might learn something new, or that my perspective might change. So who knows? I might go back, but I'll just say that at the moment, I don't really have a plan to go back. The second question that might be on your mind is, do I recommend it for others? And I think what I'm supposed to say is something like, you do you live your life the way that you want it. I'm not here to judge. And yes, all that is true. I don't judge you if you choose to drink, but I will say that I highly recommend trying it, because I don't think that alcohol is a net beneficial thing in most people's lives. I think a lot of people think it is, and who knows, I could be wrong. I don't know you, right? I suspect that for a lot of people, even most people, that if they actually went through and did what I did, they would probably reach the same conclusion as me. And so if you're asking me, not that you were asking me, but if you were asking me, I would say try it and see how you feel. All right, that'll do it for this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, which will help others find it, and subscribe for more. Peace.